Keanu Reeves stood quietly on the cracked pavement of Skid Row, his tattered hoodie a stark contrast to the Hollywood glamour he'd left behind. A passerby sneered at him, dismissing him as just another forgotten soul in the shadows of Los Angeles. But what happened over the next 7 days would leave an entire community and the world speechless, rewriting lives in ways no one saw coming. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. If you love inspiring stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we've got another incredible tale waiting for you. It began on a cold November morning in Los Angeles, when Keanu Reeves, a Hollywood icon known for his quiet demeanor and blockbuster roles, vanished. No warning, no explanation, just gone. The paparazzi didn't catch a whiff of it. His sleek motorcycle stayed parked in the garage, his mansion's doors locked tight. Even his closest friends, the few he'd let into his private world, had no idea where he'd disappeared to. Rumors swirled online. Some said he was filming a secret project, others speculated he'd retreated to mourn a private loss. But the truth was far stranger, far bolder, and infinitely more human than anyone could have guessed. Keanu hadn't vanished to escape. He'd walked away from everything, his fame, his fortune, his identity, to step into the life of those society had forgotten. He traded his tailored jackets for a worn-out coat and headed straight for Skid Row, the notorious stretch of Los Angeles where desperation clung to every corner. For 7 days he would live as a homeless man, with no safety net, no entourage, no cameras trailing his every move. This wasn't a stunt or a publicity grab, it was a choice, a deliberate, quiet rebellion against the world he'd been part of for decades. Why would a man who had it all, money, adoration, a legacy carved in celluloid, choose to disappear into the margins? The answer lay in the questions that had haunted him for years. Keanu had never been one for the spotlight's shallow glow. Behind the scenes, he'd poured millions into children's hospitals, funded cancer research, and supported programs for the homeless. His generosity wasn't a secret in Hollywood, it was a quiet legend, whispered among those who knew him and amplified by fans online. But no matter how much he gave, one thought gnawed at him. What was it really like? What happened when the cameras turned off, when the checks were cashed, when the world stopped looking? He'd written donations from a distance, but that wasn't enough anymore. He needed to feel it, to live it, not as a benefactor, but as one of them. For too long, Keanu had watched the divide grow. The city he called home glittered with wealth. Towering studios, sprawling estates, red carpets unrolled for the elite, while just miles away people slept on sidewalks, invisible to the machine that churned out dreams. He saw the injustice, the way society celebrated some lives and discarded others. It wasn't just about poverty, it was about dignity, about potential buried under neglect. He had met actors who'd clawed their way up from nothing, directors who'd once lived in their cars, and he wondered, how many more were out there, their talents lost to a world too busy to care? Keanu didn't want answers from books or documentaries. He wanted the truth from the streets, from the people who lived it every day. So he prepared. For months, he'd studied in secret, reading accounts from those who'd survived Skid Row, learning the basics of street life, where to find shelter, how to stretch $1, how to stay safe when you had nothing. He didn't tell anyone, not his agent, not his family. When the day came, he left his phone, his wallet, his name behind. He carried only a battered backpack with a thin blanket, a plastic water bottle, and a pencil tucked into a worn notebook. That was it. No fallback plan, no hidden credit card. If he was going to do this, he'd do it fully stripped of every privilege his fame had ever granted him. As he took his first steps into Skid Row, Keanu felt the weight of his decision settle in. He wasn't Keanu Reeves anymore, not the action star, not the philanthropist. He was just a man, anonymous and unremarkable, swallowed by a place that didn't care who he'd been. It was terrifying, but it was exactly where he needed to be. He wasn't here to save anyone, not yet. He was here to listen, to learn, to understand what the world refused to see, and in that understanding he hoped to find something deeper than fame, something truer than the life he'd known. This was only the beginning. If you're moved by stories that uncover the heart of humanity like this one, hit that subscribe button now. We've got more inspiring journeys coming your way. Keanu Reeves didn't look back as he stepped onto the broken streets of Skid Row, his gray hoodie pulled tight over his head, his faded jeans hanging loose on a frame that fame had once polished. In his battered backpack, he carried the barest essentials: a thin blanket, a plastic water bottle, and a dog-eared notebook with a stubby pencil shoved inside. That was all he allowed himself. No trace of the man who'd walked red carpets or signed million-dollar contracts. He'd shed that identity like an old skin, and now, as he moved deeper into this forgotten corner of Los Angeles, he became something else. Nothing. Invisible. The first hours hit him hard. He wandered the cracked sidewalks, his worn sneakers scuffing against the pavement, and watched the world rush by. Businessmen in sharp suits strode past, their eyes fixed ahead, briefcases swinging like shields against the chaos around them. Tourists snapped photos of murals and storefronts, their laughter cutting through the air. But their gazes never landed on him. Cars with tinted windows rolled by, engines purring, carrying lives that didn't intersect with his. He was a ghost among them, someone who'd once stopped traffic with a smile, now reduced to a shadow no one bothered to see. It wasn't just that they didn't recognize him. They didn't even register his existence. For the first time, Keanu understood what it meant to be erased. He kept moving, unsure where to go, but driven by a need to feel this reality fully. The sun climbed higher, baking the streets, and his stomach growled, a sharp reminder of the crumpled $3 tucked in his pocket. He didn't spend it, not yet. He'd learned enough to know it wouldn't last, and the thought of rationing it tightened his chest. By dusk, exhaustion pulled at him, his legs aching from hours of aimless steps. He found a narrow alley behind an old pawn shop, its walls stained with time and neglect. Cardboard scraps littered the ground, remnants of someone else's night, and he hesitated. Was this trespassing? Did it even matter? No one came to claim it, so he sank against the cold concrete wall, tugging his hood lower over his face. Night fell heavy and merciless. Keanu pulled the thin blanket from his pack and wrapped it around himself, but it did little against the chill seeping into his bones. The air carried a sour bite, rot and gasoline, and every sound sliced through the dark. Shouts echoed in the distance, sharp and angry. A bottle shattered somewhere down the street, the crash making him flinch. Sirens wailed faintly, too far to mean help. Then, a small gray rat darted past his foot, its tiny claws scratching the pavement. Keanu froze, staring at it as it scurried into the shadows. In that moment, something broke inside him. He wasn't Keanu Reeves, the man who'd fought villains on screen or inspired millions with his kindness. He was no different from that rat. Small, insignificant, a speck the world stepped over without a glance. He'd never felt loneliness like this, not on a film set, surrounded by hundreds yet detached. Not in a hotel room, staring at a ceiling between takes. This was raw, unrelenting solitude, a void that swallowed him whole. No one spoke to him. No one offered a nod or a scrap of warmth. He was alone in a way that clawed at his soul, and sleep wouldn't come to dull it. The cold pressed harder, his breath fogging in the dim light, and his body ached from the hard ground. He thought of his bed at home, soft and warm, of a shower to wash away the grime. Then he pushed those thoughts down. He hadn't come here for comfort. He'd come to understand. By morning, his back was stiff, his head pounding from sleeplessness. He sipped sparingly from his water bottle, his throat dry and scratchy, and forced himself to stand. His reflection caught in a grimy store window as he shuffled toward the main street. Hollow cheeks, tired eyes, a face that could belong to anyone. He didn't recognize himself, and that hit harder than the hunger or the cold. Poverty wasn't just empty pockets, he realized. It was this, the slow grind of being unseen, of mattering to no one. Like a rat in the gutter, you could be alive and still be nothing. Keanu took a shaky breath and kept walking. That first day taught him what no charity gala ever could. The injustice wasn't just in the lack of food or shelter. It was in the way people were stripped of their humanity, left to fade into the night like forgotten echoes. He clutched his notebook tighter, the pencil trembling in his hand. He'd come to learn, and already, he knew this was only the beginning of a truth too big to ignore. The second morning broke over Skid Row with a sluggish dawn, the sun barely piercing the smog that hung low over Los Angeles. Keanu Reeves pushed himself up from the cold concrete, his muscles screaming in protest after a night that offered no rest. His thin blanket was damp from the chilly air, and his fingers shook as he folded it back into his battered backpack. Every breath puffed out in small clouds, a reminder of how exposed he was. Yesterday had taught him the sting of invisibility. Today, he'd learned something deeper, something that would crack his heart open and rewrite everything he thought he knew. He shuffled down the broken sidewalk, his worn sneakers dragging, when he noticed her, a woman sitting cross-legged against a crumbling wall, her hands busy with a bent paintbrush. Clara, he'd later learn her name was, didn't look up as he approached. She was too focused on the makeshift easel propped in front of her, a piece of salvaged wood serving as her canvas. With a palette of scavenged browns and blues on a styrofoam plate, she painted a sunrise. Not the postcard kind tourists chased, but one rising over sagging rooftops, patched tarps, and tangled wires. The strokes were delicate, the colors alive, telling a story of beauty clawing its way out of ruin. Keanu stood there, captivated by this hand that wove hope from despair. "It's beautiful," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. Clara didn't respond at first, her brush moving steadily. Then she glanced at him, her dark eyes sharp and guarded, a flicker of defiance beneath the wariness. "Doesn't matter," she muttered. "Nobody buys it." He crouched beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara," she said, short and clipped. "And you're new," he nodded. "I'm John." It was the name he'd chosen, simple, safe, a mask to hide behind. She smirked faintly. "Welcome to Skid Row, John. Got anything to trade?" He shook his head. "Just words." She nodded to the pavement beside her. "Sit, then. But don't expect much." As she painted, Keanu saw the cracks in her fingers, stained with color, her shoes patched with cloth, her jacket layered over shirts to fight the cold. She could have been in a gallery in another life, he thought, her talent undeniable. "Why here?" he asked, after a silence that stretched long. Her brush paused, her lips thinning. Roof went first, then the job, then everything else. Her voice was flat, but the weight of it landed heavy on his chest. "But you still paint," he said. She stared at her canvas, her eyes distant. "What else is there?" That question lingered, a quiet wound he couldn't touch. Later, he wandered further and found Raymond, an older man perched on an overturned milk crate, his gray hair wiry under a frayed beanie. Wire-rimmed glasses sat crooked on his nose, one lens cracked as he turned the pages of a tattered book. Frost's poetry, Keanu realized. He stood nearby, listening, as Raymond's low voice murmured lines about woods and promises. The man looked up, his gaze clear and sharp, not dulled by years or hardship. "You can sit," he said simply. Keanu did, the ground cold beneath him. "Frost, huh?" he asked. Raymond nodded. Most people forget why they liked him. He tapped the book gently. "What's your name?" "John," Keanu replied. "Raymond," the man said, and they fell into silence, the poetry humming between them. "Were you a teacher?" Keanu asked after a while. Raymond's smile was faint, bittersweet. "Literature? 25 years, then layoffs, wife got sick, pension vanished, bills ate the rest." He closed the book, his fingers lingering on the cover. Kept the words, though. Keanu's throat tightened. Here was a man who'd shaped minds, now reduced to a crate and a paperback, his wisdom buried under society's indifference. That night, sleep still eluded him. He'd found a spot near a boarded-up building, curling under his blanket with his backpack as a pillow. Exhaustion dragged at him, but then, a tug. His eyes snapped open as a shadow yanked his pack away, vanishing into the dark. He scrambled up, heart pounding, but it was gone. Blanket, water, notebook, all of it. He stood there, fists clenched, the cold biting deeper now. "You shouldn't sleep alone," a voice said behind him. He turned to see Sarah, a woman in her 50s, lines etched deep around her mouth. She held out a blanket, her mismatched sweater hanging loose. "Take it," she said. He hesitated. "You need it." She shook her head. "I'll find another." "You won't." She pressed it into his hands and walked off, leaving him stunned. Keanu wrapped the blanket around himself, sitting under an overhang as the night stretched on. Sarah had nothing, yet she'd given. Clara painted beauty no one bought, just to hold on to herself. Raymond clung to poetry when the world took everything else. These weren't broken people. They were brilliant, kind, alive. Yet society saw trash where he saw treasure. He found a scrap of cardboard and a pencil stub the next morning, scribbling their names, their stories. Poverty wasn't the crisis, he realized. It was the waste of potential, the blindness to souls like theirs. His chest ached with it, a fire kindling inside him. This wasn't just survival. This was a lesson the world needed to learn. By the fourth morning, Keanu Reeves had begun to see Skid Row not just as a place, but as a pulse, a fragile rhythm of lives holding on despite everything. He woke to the faint sound of footsteps and a broom scraping the pavement, his borrowed blanket from Sarah folded neatly beside him. The alley stirred with quiet purpose. People checked their meager belongings, scavenged for scraps, set up makeshift stalls. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. A world carved from nothing. He dusted off his hoodie and joined the flow, his notebook clutched tight, its pages filling with names and stories that refused to let him go. But that day everything changed. As he walked past Clara's spot where she crouched over a new painting, he noticed a commotion further down the street. City workers in bright orange vests moved through the alley flanked by police officers. They sprayed red X's on tents and tarps, marking them for destruction. Keanu's stomach dropped. He approached a wooden pole where a notice had been pinned, tearing it down to read. The words were cold, official. In 3 days, Skid Row would be cleared, structures demolished, belongings seized, people forced out. He read it twice, then a third time, hoping it was a mistake. It wasn't. He turned, scanning the alley. Clara packed her brushes, her jaw tight. Raymond gathered his book and crate, his shoulders slumped. Sarah sorted through a box of old clothes, her hands trembling. Desperation hung thick in the air, a silent scream no one outside these streets would hear. Keanu's chest tightened. He'd come to understand, not to fix. But standing there, watching them prepare to lose everything again, he couldn't stay silent. This wasn't just poverty. It was a system crushing people it refused to see. He made a choice. That evening he gathered them by Clara's half-finished mural, a burst of gold and blue against the gray. The fire flickered low, casting shadows on their worn faces. Clara sat cross-legged, Raymond beside her, Sarah a step back. Others lingered nearby, drawn by the tension in the air. Keanu took a breath, his voice steady but low. "I need to tell you something." Their eyes locked on him, Clara's sharp, Raymond's curious, Sarah's guarded. "My name isn't John, it's Keanu Reeves." Silence hit like a thunderclap. Clara's brow furrowed, then her mouth twisted. "You're kidding." Raymond set his book down, hands unsteady. Sarah didn't move, but her gaze hardened. "I'm not," Keanu said, meeting their stares. "I came here to live this, to understand it, but I can't watch this happen and do nothing." Clara's voice rose, cold and cutting. "So what? This some rich guy's game? You slumming it for a story?" Raymond shook his head. "Why lie?" Sarah stayed quiet, but her eyes burned with doubt. "I didn't lie to hurt you," Keanu said. "I hid it so you'd trust me, not my name. But now, I'm offering something real." He pulled out his notebook, flipping to a sketch he'd drawn the night before. A plan. $1 million. To start something. Jobs, training, a community built on what you can do. Your art, Clara. Your skills, Raymond. Your heart, Sarah. We make it ours. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Clara laughed bitterly. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," he said. Raymond leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "Money doesn't buy dignity." Keanu nodded, holding his gaze. "No, but it buys time. Time for us to build dignity ourselves." The words landed heavy, a bridge between their worlds, rich and poor, fame and anonymity. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Clara crossed her arms. "And if we say no, then I walk away," Keanu said. "This isn't mine to force. It's yours to choose." The fire crackled as they weighed his words. Finally Raymond nodded slowly. "We're already surviving. Maybe this is fighting." Clara sighed, rubbing her temples. "You're crazy, Reeves." Sarah stepped closer, her voice quiet. What do we do? Keanu pointed to the mural. We start here. We build. They began that night. Clara painted signs, bold, simple. Trades welcome, skills wanted. Her brush flew, channeling anger into purpose. Raymond tinkered with a broken radio, trading it for a loaf of bread the next morning, his hands steady with new resolve. Sarah gathered a small group, organizing blankets and water, her kindness a quiet anchor. Keanu joined them, hauling salvaged wood, bartering with vendors for food. It was small apples here, aspirin there. But it sparked something. They weren't just waiting to be swept away, they were moving, together. The eviction loomed, a shadow over every step, but for the first time, they faced it as a unit. Keanu watched Clara trade a sketch for a sandwich, saw Raymond teach a kid to twist wires, felt Sarah's hand on his shoulder as she handed him water. This wasn't charity. It was power, raw and real. The system had failed them, but they wouldn't fail each other. His notebook filled faster now, not just with observations, but with hope. Change didn't need permission, it needed belief. And as the fire died to embers, Keanu knew they were building something no bulldozer could touch. The seventh morning dawned over Skid Row with a tension that vibrated through the air. Keanu Reeves stood by Clara's mural, its colors defiant against the gray, as the rumble of engines grew louder. Bulldozers rolled in, flanked by police and city workers, their orange vests glaring under the pale light. The eviction had come, just as the notice promised. Around him, people scrambled. Clara clutched her brushes, Raymond shoved his book into a bag. Sarah rallied a few stragglers. 3 days hadn't been enough to save everything, but it had been enough to start something. Keanu's heart thudded. He wouldn't let it end here. He marched toward the line of officers, his hoodie still pulled low, his voice steady. "Wait," he called. The lead officer, a broad man with a clipboard, barely glanced up. "Step aside." Keanu stepped closer. "You need to stop this, now." The officer frowned, squinting at him, recognition flickering. "Wait, are you—" "Keanu Reeves," he said quickly. "And I'm asking for 48 hours. Call your supervisor." The officer hesitated, then raised his radio, muttering into it. Keanu turned back to the alley, catching Clara's wide eyes, Raymond's nod, Sarah's quiet hope. Minutes later, the officer returned. 15 minutes, he grunted. "Then we move." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Keanu rallied them by the mural. "Listen up," he shouted. "I've got buses coming. Temporary shelter, a start. It's not perfect, but it's ours." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah helped an old man to his feet. Raymond directed the kids. Clara cradled her paintings. Then the buses arrived. Unmarked, called in through favors Keanu had pulled without fanfare. One by one they boarded, Keanu the last to climb on, standing beside Sarah. "You coming?" he asked her. She nodded, her eyes soft. "Yeah, but this better be real," he smiled faintly. "It is." By noon, he was in the Los Angeles City Council chambers, no longer in rags but a crisp jacket, his notebook in hand. The room buzzed with skepticism as he stepped to the podium. "You've got 48 hours, he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "Delay the eviction, work with me. I'm offering $1 million. Not for handouts, but for jobs, training, a chance to turn Skid Row into potential. Not a problem you keep erasing." Councilmember Rivera leaned forward, doubtful. "And why should we?" "Because these people aren't trash," Keanu said. "They're artists, teachers, builders. You're burning talent because you won't look." The room shifted, whispers rising. Rivera nodded slowly. 48 hours. Show us results." A year later, the Reeves Redemption Project wasn't just a name, it was a movement. Clara's studio downtown buzzed with students, her murals no longer traded for bread but sold to galleries, her hands steady with purpose. Raymond's school, a cluster of buildings born from tents, echoed with kids' laughter, his cracked glasses glinting as he taught math and hope. Sarah led the community hub, her quiet strength guiding work crews and families, her mismatched sweater a badge of resilience. Across the country, cities like Oakland and Chicago adopted the model, jobs not pity, skills not sweeps. Keanu's $1 million had been the seed, but their grit grew it into something unstoppable. Then, one morning he was gone. No speech, no farewell. Clara found a note under her paint cans. "This is yours now. Keep painting." Raymond's came tucked in his book. "You've got this. Teach them everything." Sarah's was slipped into her coat. "You were the heart. Don't stop." They never saw him leave, but his shadow lingered in every brush stroke, every lesson, every step forward. Skid Row wasn't erased. It was reborn, a testament to what belief could build. Months later in Griffith Park, a boy of 6 sat crying on a bench, his shoelace dangling loose. No one stopped. Except a man in an old brown jacket, a cap low over his face, a motorcycle helmet at his feet. He knelt silently, tying the lace with careful hands, a double knot to hold. The boy sniffled, looking up. The man smiled softly, patted his shoulder, and stood. "Thank you," a mother called, but he was already walking away, helmet on, engine rumbling as he rode off into the dusk. A tourist snapped a photo, swearing it was Keanu Reeves. No one could prove it, but everyone believed it, because it felt true. That quiet act, that flicker of kindness, was his legacy. Keanu hadn't just lived as a beggar for 7 days, he'd shone a light into the dark, not with fanfare but with faith. He was the silent spark that turned Clara's brush into a voice, Raymond's words into a future, Sarah's heart into a home. The world often missed. Dignity restored not by noise but by hands reaching out when no one watched. The shoe, tied tight, became a symbol. Support didn't need a spotlight to matter. He was out there somewhere, they said, riding his motorcycle along the Pacific, sketching in a Kyoto garden, sitting by a fire with someone lost. Keanu didn't need credit. He'd never asked for it. The Reeves redemption grew without him, a ripple of hope spreading because one man dared to see what others ignored. Clara's art hung in the Smithsonian. Raymond's school won awards. Sarah's community thrived, and that boy, he'd tell the story someday, of the stranger who stopped when no one else did. This was the truth Keanu left behind. Kindness, quiet and steady, could change the world. Not with headlines, but with trust. Trust in people, in their worth, in their fight. Keanu Reeves' story hits me hard, not just because of his fame, but because it forces us to ask, what's our excuse? He didn't need to sleep on Skid Row to care, yet he did, proving compassion isn't about convenience, it's about sacrifice. I think he's a rare soul showing us that real change doesn't shout, it listens. But part of me wonders, can one man's gesture fix a broken system, or is it just a feel-good moment we'll forget? Maybe it's both, a spark and a challenge. What do you think? Does quiet leadership like his inspire you, or does it feel too small against the world's mess? I'd love to hear your take below. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Your thoughts keep these stories alive. Like, share, and subscribe for more tales that make us feel and think.